back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to do a wrap up for the month of January, which was quite a strange month for me because, as you guys know, I was in hospital having an operation, then I had 2 weeks out of work, so I read more than I normally would, I think, because I was at home for 2 weeks. However, in that 2 weeks, I predominantly just slept, so I don't think I read anywhere near the level I would if I was just off for 2 weeks, but you know, we still got a lot of reading done and it was a pretty successful month overall. I had a real mixture of things, so some things I really didn't like, other things I really enjoyed. So I'm going to go from lowest to highest as always, and a lot of these I've already done reviews for, so I'll link those below if you are interested in finding out a bit more information about them. So let's get started. The first one I had was a SPFBO title, so it was one of the self-published BLOODFIST titles, and this was Pilgrimage to Skara, which I gave a 1.5. I wasn't a huge fan. I've done a review, so if you want to know why, you can check that out and I'll link it below. The next one I read was a short story collection which was sent to me for review, and I wasn't a big fan of this. It's Starlings by Jo Walton. It was a real mixture of kind of experimental short stories, and a lot of them just didn't work for me. There's also poetry, but I gave it a 2 stars in the end, and again I have reviewed it already. Next up was another SPFBO one. This one I gave 2.5 and this was Tiger Lily. I then read Chaos Trims My Beard, which also got 2.5, although I do have to say that I love the name of that one. I think it's a great title. It just didn't capture my attention as I wanted. I then read Jack BLOODFIST Fixer, which also got 2.5. You can see there is a bit of a theme this month with SPFBO titles. And The Way into Chaos, another one of the SPFBOs, also got 2.5 from me. Next up I read Inconvenient People. This is one of the Wellcome Book Prize books that I am reading with Eleanor. I'm really happy I read this because I think I learned an awful lot, but it wasn't my favourite book we've read so far. I did actually do a live show where I discussed this book in quite a lot of detail with Eleanor, so if you're interested in finding out more about this book and just generally listening to us have a chat because we had a great time, then I will link that live show as well and you can go and check that out if you're interested. But I gave that one a 3 stars in the end. Next up I read Kings of the Wild and I gave this one a 3.5, and I have already reviewed it. It didn't really hit the hype as much as I thought it was going to, but I am very keen to continue on with the series even though it didn't quite get to where I wanted, because I think the second one might be more my kind of thing, and I have reviewed this already. I also read The Vagrant by NEWMAN, which I also gave a 3.5 stars to, and this one is one that I've had on my TBR for ages, so I'm really glad I finally got round to it. I think my new project where I read things within 6 weeks really is helping me to cut back on acquiring books, so it does mean I can go back into kind of my backlist and TBR and actually choose some of the older titles, and this was one of those, and I'm really happy I got to it because, again, I gave it 3.5. It is a series I'm intrigued enough to continue with, so I'm keeping it for now, and I would love to hear your thoughts if you've read it, and I have reviewed this in full if you want to know more as well. Next up I read a Tor.com novella, which is WEAVER'S Lament by Newman. This one is the sequel to Brothers Ruin, and I really enjoy this series. It's a sort of steampunk one, however they're super short, so I gave it a 3.5 and I have reviewed this one already too. I then read Day of the TRIFFIDS, which is by WYNDHAM. This is one of the books that I needed to read within 6 weeks, so I have successfully done that, I'm happy to say, and I read this as a buddy read with Lorna and also with Amanda. I will link their channels down below. We had a great time discussing it. It was really interesting. It's definitely made me want to pick up more of John Wyndham's work, so I'm intrigued by a couple of his other books, particularly I think The Chrysalids is one that we're going to possibly pick up, but do let me know if you have other recommendations. I gave this one a 4 stars in the end and I have already reviewed it. One that I've not reviewed yet, although I will be doing soon, is True Things About Me by Deborah K. Davies. This is another one I just randomly picked off of my TBR, and I have read the other book that this author has, so I kind of knew what I was getting into going into this, but it is a massively triggery book, and it's triggery for all sorts of things such as rape, abuse, domestic violence, domestic abusive relationships. It's definitely got an awful lot of horrible stuff in it, so I would steer clear if you are not able to deal with those sorts of things or they would be triggers for you. However, if you like beautifully written stories, then this one is that, and it follows a young woman who gets into an abusive relationship and can't really escape. And it is very beautifully written and very interesting. It's got terrible reviews on Goodreads, such mixed reviews actually, but I've read this author's other book and really enjoyed that, so I think I knew what I was getting when I went into this, and therefore I gave this 4 stars, but I am certainly clear that this will not be for everyone, and it's one to avoid if those things are going to upset you. Next up, another 4-star book from me is one of the SPFBO ones, and that is Where Loyalties Lie by Rob J. Hayes. I really enjoyed this one. It's a pirate story, it's really good fun, and I have already reviewed it if you want to know more. I'm definitely excited to get on with the second one at some point soon too. Really looking forward to finding out where it goes and how the story ends, because it is just a duology. Really enjoyable, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 as well. One that I audiobooked was Wrath, and this is the 4th and final one by John Gwynne in his Faithful and Fallen series. I wanted to finish this series up before starting his new one, which I recently picked up the book for, and I have reviewed this now. I'm definitely happy to finish the series. I thought it was very strong as a series ender, and I gave it 4 stars. Another one that got 4 stars from me is actually the first in a series, and again it's one I've had on my TBR for a while, so I was happy to get to it. That is Shards of Honor by Louis McMaster Bujold. This one is the start of a big epic series called the Volkosagan series, and I believe it follows the main character Cordelia for the first 2 books and then her son for the rest of the books. And I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. I do enjoy Bujold's writing, and this was the first science fiction of hers that I'd read, and it was just generally a really fun, entertaining read. Science fiction that I could get into, so it's quite light on the SF elements. It's more about the adventure, the action, the characters, which is what I love, and I gave this a 4 stars. Next up, I read The Bells, which is by Donnell Clayton. This is a new YA release coming out in February, and it's one that I definitely think a lot of you would enjoy. It is a sort of futuristic, almost utopian dystopian setup, all about beauty and beauty standards and how they have corrupted this world. It's a very interesting story, and I have reviewed it in full, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 because it was just one of those YA books that completely grabbed me and sucked me into the story, and I just really enjoyed it. Another one that got 4.5 stars from me is the Sherry S. Tepper book Raising the Stones. I am aware that this is apparently the second one in a series, and I started with it, so I made an error there, but it can be read completely on its own. It doesn't need any of the backstory from the first book. I don't know how much more you get from it if you have read the first book, which is Grass, but I've read this one. This was my first Tepper. I really enjoyed it. It was very focused on religion and science, and it was all set in space on different planets and different cultures, and it was just really fascinating. It had a lot going for it. If you do want to know more, I have reviewed this one, and I just think it's really, really interesting. So I actually gave this a 4.5 stars, and I'm definitely keen to read more of Sherry S. Tepper's work now that I've read this one. And finally, the last book and my most impressive book of the month was another SPFBO one. So I'm super happy that 2 of them I really did enjoy. Sufficiently Advanced Magic by Andrew Rowe. I loved it. It was fantastic. If you've not already seen my review for this, then you should definitely go check it out, because this book just completely was my kind of thing, and it was also completely different from a lot of stuff I had already read, and it stood out, and it was definitely a book worth reading. I gave this 5 stars, which is, as you know, quite difficult for me to give out 5 stars. I don't do it that often, but this just wowed me, and it was just such a wonderful read. I'm so excited for the second book whenever that comes out, and I will definitely be picking it up whenever it does. I bought this copy myself because I love the book so much, and I just think so many of you would enjoy it too, so definitely check this one out if you have a chance. So that is everything I read in the month of January. I'm actually quite close to finishing quite a few books, so I imagine February I should have a decent-ish reading month. Really happy with how my reading has been going this month. I think this whole buying and getting things and reading them within 6 weeks is working so far. I have been reading a lot of what I picked up, but also I've been reading a lot of my backlist titles because I've been sort of slipping them in besides all of the other things. So I'm really happy about that, and I hope you guys are enjoying the mixture of like newer titles and older titles as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.